Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube reviews. I'm Devin Dunnigan, and today we're going to dive into some newer era Molly Hatchet with 1996's Devil's Canyon, produced by Bobby Ingram, Kalle Trapp, and Rainer Hänsel. This is known to be the first of the newer era Molly Hatchet, the first to feature Phil McCormack on lead vocals, replacing a departed Danny Joe Brown who had to leave during this era of the band. He was involved with the initial recording sessions of the album, but doctors forced him to leave, and he has some co-writes on this album that they actually performed before this album came out. They went on some tours here and there, and I mean there was a revolving door of lineups, which I'm not going to get into today about, but let's go ahead and get into this album with the first track, Down from the Mountain. Great opening to the album. Starts with a little bit of slide, kind of similar maybe to T for Texas, the Skinner cover of it, and great opening track. Kind of sets the mood for the album, how the album's going to be, and kind of sets the mood for what Molly Hatchet from now on is going to be. And I think it's a really good track. And we move to the next track, Rolling Thunder. This features a writing credit from Banner Thomas, the original bassist, who had came back a small while before this album was released, and of course Danny Joe Brown. And great track once again. I mean, you can very much tell this featured involvement by Danny Joe Brown, and great track, great track. The next track, Devil's Canyon, another one to feature a co-writing credit from Danny Joe Brown. Very much in vain to classic Molly Hatchet. I love this song. Probably one of the best tracks, if not the best track on the album. And move to the next track, Heartless Land. I believe this features a sole writing credit by Bryan Basset, who was very much new to the band at this point. And once again, great track. The next track, Never Say Never. Once again, another great track. The next track, Tatanka. This was performed before the album came out with Danny Joe Brown, even though Danny Joe Brown does not have a credit for this song. I love this song. One of the best tracks on the album. I kind of get a progressive rock kind of vibe from this. And great track. The next track, Come Hell or High Water. Once again, another great track. I really can't say much else other than a great track. The next track, The Look in Your Eyes, which was the single off the album. When they released it to radio, it was in a shorter version. I believe this version is like 6 minutes long. And, I mean, great track. Kind of Molly Hatchet's attempt at a straight power ballad. And I think it's a really good song. The next track, Eat Your Heart Out. Once again, a pretty good track. I like it. The next track, The Journey. Another very good track, kind of in similar vein to Devil's Canyon. Very much kind of its sister song on the album. I really like it. And then the album ends with a acoustic cover of Dreams I'll Never See. They had recorded a cover of it for their first album, which I think was like a cover of a Buddy Miles. It was Allman Brothers, but Buddy Miles had kind of revamped it, and they were covering his version of the song. But they do it acoustically on here, and it has it's a very atmospheric version, and I really like it. But I mean, overall, to me, a great album. This was the first album that they had released in 7 years. The last album they had released was 1989's Lightning Strikes Twice, and I liked that album. I thought it was a good return to form. It had some bits and pieces of that came before it from The Deed Is Done, which was basically them moving into a more commercial rock route. And I mean, that was the first to feature Bobby Ingram. Bobby Ingram, I think, is the longest serving member of the band, because John Galvin's been out here and there throughout the years. And I mean, this album's a pretty long album. It clocks in at 58 minutes and 28 seconds, and nearly an hour. And I mean, every album since has pretty much been the same way. They make very long albums. I kind of somewhat have a problem with it, but this album, I mean, is a pretty quick listen. I mean, it kind of goes by within within a little bit of time, it seems like. But the art on the album was the first for the band by Paul Raymond Gregory. I believe he's still doing their artwork now, and he does a great job. Does a really good job, and I mean, I said this was the first to feature Phil McCormack. Phil McCormack stayed with them. He was, I believe, their longest-serving lead vocalist, and he stayed with them until his death last year. And I mean, he sounded very, very identical to Danny Joe Brown. He had filled in for him on one of the tours prior, I believe, in 1992. And, I mean, he sounds good. He sounds very good, sounds very much like Danny Joe Brown. And I think that was what they were going for, someone who sounded like Danny Joe Brown and that could perform all those songs and do them justice. And, I mean, there's rumor has it that their second vocalist, Jimmy Farrar, was brought back for a short time before this album was recorded or released, and fans just didn't want it, and so they brought in Phil McCormack. I don't know how true that is. I saw that on YouTube. It kind of surprised me, but I mean, overall, Devil's Canyon I think is a really, really good album. I don't know much of the other albums. I know songs here and there. I've heard Warriors of the Rainbow Bridge, and that was a decent album. I like some tracks off of this, but by far this album is my favorite of the Phil McCormack, Bobby Ingram version of Molly Hatchet so far. Of course, like I said, Phil McCormack has died last year, and he was replaced by a guy named Jimmy Elkins, who was in I believe a cover band called Bounty Hunter, I believe it was called. And I mean, this was recorded in Germany, which is where they have a big fan base over in Germany. So, I mean, they spend a lot of their time over there touring, and I think they probably recorded most of their albums after this over there. But, I mean, the lineup for the album, I mean, is Danny Joe Brown. I mean, he was credited, but he didn't sing at all on the album. I think they started the album with him, but about not even halfway through the recording sessions, he was asked to, well, he wasn't asked. I think the doctors basically told him, hey, you need to sit this one out because of your health issues. Pretty similar to the reason he had to leave in the first place in 1980. And, I mean, they replaced him with Phil McCormack, and he performed all lead vocals on this album, wrote most of the songs, and with Bobby Ingram. And I mean, you had Bryan Basset he came from Foghat to this band because Foghat had reunited with their original lineup before this album, and he came to this band and would leave this band to go back to Foghat with Lonesome Dave, revamping it once again. And I mean, he's a very good fit. John Galvin, of course, he joined the band. He performed with them back in '83 on the No Guts, No Glory album, but he was an official member of the band until '84's The Deed Is Done. And he performs keyboards. Andy McKinney performs bass, and Matt Crawford performs drums. And this was kind of probably the band's most stable lineup until the early 2000s when Bryan Basset would leave, Andy McKinney would leave, and Matt Crawford would leave, and then they would all be replaced by various different people. Another revolving door of lineups. Providing backing vocals is Rolf Köhler and Mickey Barker. And, I mean, this album I heard for the first time last night, and I really enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised with this album. I didn't know what exactly. I knew a bunch of songs off this album, but I didn't exactly know what a lot of other songs were going to hold. And I think this album stands up with classic Molly Hatchet. I think it's one of the best things they've put out. And, I mean, this is probably the best album they've put out since maybe Flirt with Disaster or either No Guts, No Glory. Because I love both of the Jimmy Farrar albums a whole lot. But, I mean, this album be the first of the kind of Bobby Ingram, Molly Hatchet. He would, I think, get the official name in, I think, like 2000 or something. I think he would lease and then obtain the name. And, I mean, there was a couple of other versions of Molly Hatchet floating around out there, but they wouldn't, of course, credit it as Molly Hatchet. It was basically the original members. Gator Country was one of them, and I think an amalgamation of Blackfoot and Molly Hatchet was Southern Rock All-Stars. Each of them had pretty similar lineups, but I mean, this featured pretty much a whole different era for a version of Molly Hatchet. I mean, Dave Lubeck would come back after all of these albums. He would come back in 2005, right after Denny Joe Brown died. And he would perform on Warriors of the Rainbow Bridge. And, I mean, might as well start closing this album out. Released 1996, once again. Very good album. Kind of ignited the new era of Molly Hatchet. Sets the tone for all the rest of the albums. Like I said, I know some tracks, like Mississippi Moondog's a pretty good track. Blue Thunder's a pretty good track. Son of the South I really like from Warriors of Rainbow Bridge. Why Won't You Take Me Home's a pretty good song. And the title track from their latest album, Justice, is really good. They just put out a live album back in November called Battleground Live. And it's a really good live album. I don't own it, but I've heard it and or heard majority of the tracks from it. And it's a really, really good live album. And, I mean, I recommend if you don't know Molly Hatchet, pick up either that album or The Greatest Hits. If you want to know newer era Molly Hatchet, I'd pick that up because it's kind of a pretty good balance between each era. But if you want to get into Molly Hatchet, I recommend totally the Greatest Hits album. And I recommend mostly the 2001 extended edition, which features some bonus tracks that weren't included on the original Greatest Hits. And I think it is a more complete version. But I mean, both versions are, I mean, the same thing pretty much, other than the bonus tracks. 2 new tracks was on that. I think it was like the last kind of original type Molly Hatchet that there was before. Because they broke up the band in 90 and then put the band back together in 90 with new musicians. And, I mean, Greatest Hits is something I recommend if you want to get into Molly Hatchet. Because, I mean, you've got pretty much all of the... You've got pretty much something that covers all the eras. I mean, or the original eras. I mean, you've got Whiskey Man, Flirting with Disaster, Bounty Hunter. On the 2001, you got The Creeper, It's All Over Now, Fall of the Peacemakers. Bloody Reunion and Beating the Odds are not the studio version, they're the live version from Double Trouble Live. No Jimmy Farrar tracks are featured on the Greatest Hits, but I mean, I'm about to get into the Greatest Hits. I also want to touch on a live DVD I have called Live from Rock Palace 1996. This is I think like the first show where Phil McCormack's officially the lead singer of the band, or one of the first shows. Very good show. Several of the songs from this album are in the set. Down from the Mountain, Rolling Thunder, the title track, and The Journey. I do know that Tatanka was a live staple there for a while, as was those previous songs I just mentioned. They were live staples for the band. And it's a good live DVD. Kind of has Leslie Hawkins singing backing vocals. She was one of the original honkettes for Lynyrd Skynyrd. And, yeah, in closing, I give this album 5 out of 5 stars, I guess. I mean, to me, it's a solid album, one of their best. I need to get in touch with the newer era Molly Hatchet. I need to kind of get in touch with that era and listen and kind of absorb all those albums, because I know most of the original albums. In fact, I know pretty much all of them. They're all, I mean, all to me are good from the original era. But before before I close out, I want to do a review. I just reviewed Ozzy Osbourne's Ordinary Man, and I said there was a bonus track called Darkside Blues. It was finally released to YouTube. Somebody put it on there from the Japanese edition of the album. It's a very short song, 1 minute and 47 seconds, or on YouTube it's 1 minute 48. I mean, there's not a big difference. But, I mean, a very kind of bluesy track. It's got Ozzy on harmonica. I enjoy it. It's very, like I said, it's very short. It's a very bluesy number. And I kind of think if the whole album was like it, I think it would have been a much better album than it actually is. And I mean, I said I didn't hate that album on my previous review. But yeah, I'm going to close everything out now. This was episode 2 of my YouTube reviews. I hope you enjoy, like, comment, subscribe. And I'll try to be back up with some more reviews coming soon. I'm trying to start these YouTube reviews back. I'd done them a long time ago, and I became dissatisfied with them. So I deleted all of them. Then I've tried starting back several times. But I'm going to try my best to kind of start doing more YouTube reviews. I'm going to make it more DVDs, movie reviews, along with album reviews. That's pretty much my bread and butter there, is movie and CDs. That's the two things I love. And I mean, music, movies. And I'm going to try my best to start doing a lot more YouTube reviews. I've been off this week, so I've had the chance. I like to put up the Ordinary Man review, and that was kind of off, that kind of all of a sudden thing, off the cuff thing. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. This is episode 2, Molly Hatchet, Devil's Canyon, 1996, and yeah, I'll be back with something pretty soon. Thank you very much.